Okay, everybody, hello and welcome to day 4 of the self-awareness mini course. I'm so glad you guys are here. We have done some incredible stuff over the last 3 days so far, 4 if you were here for the bonus day. And that is not going to end just yet. No, sir. We are going to continue to press forward on building that unshakable confidence, that stuff that we can develop when we dig deep into our emotional sobriety journey and push forward to challenge ourselves, to get to know ourselves a little bit better, to learn more about how others are perceiving us and how that all ties into our recovery journey. And I hope you're picking up all of that along the way. I really hope you're doing your homework. It's really helpful to continue the progress that we do. These sessions are rather short. I'm just giving you the information, kind of going over it with you in a visual and verbal way so that you can hit all of those sensory modalities for learning. But the work is going to come when you sit down personally with your pen and paper and the workbook that I created for you to really dive into this content in a very personal way. And of course, as I've said all week, there's really probably not going to be an opportunity for you to do all of this work just in this 1 week. Of course, that's why there will be more opportunities for you to continue working with me as well as the other members in the group or anybody else who wants to come along in some things I'm going to share with you tomorrow and into Saturday on our bonus day of how you can continue this work with us so that you don't lose traction, right? So that you don't lose the momentum for what you've been doing and so that you can complete what you've started. Because of course, this is literally just merely scratching the surface and I would never leave you hanging that way. That wouldn't be fair. So you're scratching the surface now, and then we'll have opportunities to continue working together in a couple of different ways that I'm going to share with you so that you can continue to develop confidence with self-awareness. Okay, so let's dive in. I'm going to share my screen, which I hope you can already see, and get into this material. Okay, so today's day 4, like I mentioned, we've covered a bunch of content up until now. Yesterday, we talked a lot about external self-awareness, what that really means, and how we can get information from other people by asking very specific ways for feedback from trusted people, right? Not just anybody. And today we are going to start talking about the barriers to self-awareness. So in all things that we're trying to do or change or grow with ourselves, there are always going to be barriers to them. And that doesn't mean that they're not overcomable or that they're, insurmountable or impossible. It just means that they're there. And it's really helpful when we know what they are so that we can then combat them or at least understand that they're there, so that we don't get totally like derailed by getting off course. Okay. And then also understanding how to course correct if we do get off track, right? All right. So today we're going to talk about some of these. So the 4 big ones that I've identified for us to utilize today in our work are having undefined goals. We talked a little bit about some creating goals before, and then also I provided you with that bonus content around building SMART goals, right? That SMART model for building goals. And there is a link to that bonus PDF material in the email that you got sent today. If you didn't receive it for some reason, let me know. I can also put it in the Facebook group to be sure that it's there, because it's a guide to help you understand how to do proper goal setting and then how to be effective in that way. The next one is relegated personal responsibility. Taking personal responsibility is obviously critical in all of our personal growth. Avoiding pain through distraction, and then not tapping into your strengths. We spent a lot of time on strengths in day 2, I believe it was 1 or 2. And then of course there was a big homework assignment on understanding your own personal strengths. So when we don't tap into those, it can be a barrier to our self-awareness success. So undefined goals, okay? One of the first barriers that I mentioned is not having clear or even any goals. Sometimes we think we do, or we have them in our heads, or we have abstract goals, right? But if we are not consistently focusing on what you want in life or what you want to do or create, or who you want to attract in your life. And we oftentimes miss the mark, or we don't make those opportunities happen. So most of us have heard this, right? We know the importance of having some goals in life. We often talk about it at the end of the year, around, resolutions or goal setting. And I believe that it is important for us to have these and also to write them down and to have a specific process. It's also important to break them down into smaller categories and then sometimes subcategories within those to make them even smaller. So some of the goals we might have in life are around your work or your professional life. Some might be your physical health. Some might be around family or spirituality, or there might just be other things in general that you are tackling as a human being and want to make goals around. Because again, if we don't consistently do this, we're not going to move towards really anything we want, because it'll be in our brains. It might even come out of our mouths sometimes, where we're not carving out a direct path towards it. So we're not putting in place those skills or tools or actions that are going to move us towards that goal in life. So goals are really what let you know if you're on the path or off the path. Are you moving towards what you want in life, or who you want to be attracted to, or the things you want to create or do, or are you deviating from your path? So goals are really what help us as to be the guideposts of that. We want them to be very clear and specific and attainable, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute, to help us when our motivation is low. Right? We want to be able to turn to something, a piece of paper, a picture, something in a folder where we can really look at it when our motivation is low, or our stress levels get very high and kind of, again, sway us off that course. Because in those tough times, when it's hard to stay on track, these goals have clearly been defined already, and it really prevents you from going too far off the rails. Sometimes we might step off a little, like a day or two or something, and then we just course correct because we have them very specifically made. For me, I know I've mentioned a few times that emotional eating has been the thing that seems to derail me when I'm not completely grounded in my physical health goals, and I don't have constant contact with my accountability partners or my community in general. So when stress levels rise for me, or there's a situation that occurs and the emotions are really running high, for some reason, my natural tendency these days tends to be jumping into those highly processed carbs, or reaching for sugar, or just seeking out something to kind of numb out those feelings. So it's important for me, maybe you can relate to this, or maybe there's something else you can identify that really derails you. It's important for me to be rooted in those goals, to have a firm understanding of what they are, and to be checking in with them regularly. But then again, having that community to back me, those people I can turn to be like, oh, this thing happened, I'm really struggling, totally want to go get a milkshake right now, and have them be able to listen to me and receive that information and then support me in the best way that meets my needs. Maybe you can identify something in your life. It could be shopping. It could just be vegging out. It could be checking out, sometimes that is also a barrier to goals, right? We're going to talk about that in a minute. Where we zone out, or we just close ourselves off, right? To others, to our own feelings. So I want you to kind of think about those things. What are the things that you can identify, or your go-to sources to reach for when your stress levels run high? And then it helps you to understand why clearly defined goals for different areas of your life are so important. So let's talk about SMART goals for a second. I want to help you understand what this model is. So it's an acronym, SMART, and each one stands for a word, obviously. And it's a pretty popular model for goal setting. You can find a lot of material on it on the internet. I made you a beautiful PDF that you can use to help guide you along the way. And I just want to go over it. So the first letter is S. It stands for specific. So we want to get better at setting goals that use a very specific format, like SMART goals, right? Think of a goal that you have. Maybe it's like a simple one or a bigger one, but just something that you have right now that we can kind of use for this. So we want specifically to know what it is. What is it? Why are you wanting to work towards this goal? And this one can be tricky. We don't want to, I would encourage you to dig deep. You girls are seekers, right? So I want you to challenge yourself to work a little harder in this, not just, well, I want to lose weight or I want to be healthy. But once you get to when you say the what and then the why, ask yourself again, well, why do I want that? Really dig in on that why, because when you go down below, you're like, well, I want to be healthy so I can live a long life. Well, why do you want that? Well, I want to be able to be here for my children and meet my grandchildren and share time with them. Why do you want that? Because family is really important to me and I want to be able to leave a legacy that's meaningful. Okay, so that gets to like a pretty significant core value of yours. So when you keep going and drilling down on the whys, you can get to some pretty great juicy stuff. Okay, where is the goal happening? Are there specific locations? Who else is involved in this? Who will do it with you? Who will hold you accountable? Who is going to be, who do you need to use to do the goal with? And then when is it? What is the time frame? When is it going to happen? So get real specific. The second letter is M for measurable. So how will you measure this goal? Meaning, so weight is always an example that's very easy to use. I want to lose 20 pounds and I want to do it by, August 31st or whatever. So this many days. And so you can measure it by keeping track of that over time. Or maybe it's, I want to run a marathon in the spring of 2022. And so I'm going to get a training plan that is for that many, I'm making this up, however many weeks that is, 26 weeks. And then each week I'll be able to measure my progress along the way. And when will you know if you've attained it? Obviously, some of these really hard and fast ones I've mentioned, weight loss or training for a marathon, are pretty specific. They have an end date or an end weight, when you're going to achieve it. If it's a professional goal that's a little more loose, like I want to advance myself professionally, well, that's going to need some real specifics right around that. What does that look like for you? Well, I would like to be the manager of my company by the time I'm 45. Okay, well, right now you're 42 and you want to be the manager of the company by then. What are the things that you need to do along the way from now until the end of that? And then how will you know you've achieved it? Well, you'll be the manager. So those are kind of easier ones. There might be goals that you have, like maybe it's a spiritual goal, like I would like to be closer to a higher power, or I would like to feel more peace and serenity on the inside. Those are a little bit more tricky. Like, how are you going to know when you feel more peace and serenity on the inside? What will that look like? Well, maybe you won't be getting as angry or irritable with your family members, your children, or your spouse. You'll respond to things differently. Maybe you will be able to just not let things bother you as much. Things will come into your world, you'll receive them, but you won't get all bent out of shape about it. So just make sure that you have a way of measuring that goal. You want the goals to be attainable. That's the letter A for attainable. Is it attainable with your current skill set or resources? So meaning, do you have what it takes right now to work towards this goal? So in all the examples I've given so far, if you want to run a marathon, are you physically capable of running? Okay, well, this is important, right? Maybe you're not capable of running a marathon today, but are you a person that has the ability to run? Okay, you don't have any health issues or physical disabilities that are preventing you from doing this. If you're working towards becoming the manager at your company, it's pretty likely that there's at least an HR job description or something that lets you know what is the actual job description of that goal that you're working towards. What are the skills that are required for that job? And do you have them? And if you don't, how can you get them? So if you don't have the skills that are required for that job, maybe there are hard skills like understanding Excel or being able to write code or um, understanding how to write reviews of employees, things like that. Maybe those are skills that you would need to learn, right? So you would take a class to learn how to do those things. If there's softer skills like communication skills or empathy or learning how to be more culturally sensitive, things like that, those are skills that you can also learn. And just you're going to have to figure out how to get those into your life. If you don't have the skills or resources to work towards that, to attain that goal, how can you get them? And if you cannot attain those requirements, then maybe you need to reevaluate the goal. If for some reason you look at this and you're like, well, actually, there is no way I can attain those skills. I just don't think that's possible. Then you might have to reevaluate the goal. And so then maybe you make it smaller and you're like, well, I'd rather just, I don't think I have the skills to be the manager of this whole company. So maybe I can be the manager of my department, or maybe I can be a mentor to my employees. And that's a little bit of a step up too. So look for ways where whatever goals you're working on, you can make it a little bit smaller. Maybe you can't be the leader of the women's Bible study, but you certainly can participate and you can be like a table leader, or you can be the person who sends out the prayer requests, something like that. The R stands for relevance. So we want to make sure that this goal is actually relevant to your life, right? And the completion of this goal is going to be beneficial to you in some way. So is this relevant to you? If you have some kind of goal like, I'm trying to think of one. Well, the first thing that came to my mind, and this is a silly kind of joke in our family, like I always say I want to have a food truck. I don't know why. I'm obsessed with food trucks. I just love them. I think they're really cool. And I have an idea for it. And I don't necessarily know that I really want that to be like a goal for my life. I just think it would be really cool. And it's not really relevant to my life. It's not really relevant to my family. It probably would detract from our family life versus give to my family life, which is why this is sort of just a fun thing to talk about. It's not something I'm actually going to work towards. So that's the only thing I can think of about relevancy right now. But a professional goal might be, is this going to be beneficial to your life? So like, maybe, is this going to increase your pay? Is this going to increase your quality of life? Does attaining this level in your professional life mean you'll have more time at home? Maybe your schedule will be different. Maybe you're working nights and now you'll be able to work daytime. So that means you'll have a little bit more of a quote unquote normal schedule with your family. That would be a relevant goal. And then really checking in with the relevancy to make sure that it aligns with your overall core values. Now, of course, you would need to know what your core values are first before you could even make sense of this to see if it was relevant to your core values. And core values is something that we talk about in the Sober Freedom Inner Circle. It's a huge part of what I do there with my members to help them understand what their personal core values are. And the last letter is T. We want to make sure that this goal is timely. When can you expect it to be achieved by? Can you put a realistic timeline from both a long and short-term process? So making sure that if it is a long-term goal, if it's a 5-year goal, you're like, I want to be the manager of this company by the time I'm 45 and now I'm 40. And so that feels like a relevant goal to you because it's going to give you more flexibility and more income and quality of life. And then you break that down into much smaller pieces. Okay, so if this is where you want to be in 5 years, what do you need to do in like 2 years to get to that? Where do you need to be in 2 years to be aligned with that goal? And then 1 year, and then 6 months, 3 months, and 1 month, all the way down to today. So even if it is a long-term goal, you can break that down into these quantities of time to make it smaller and smaller, all the way getting to today. That means you can literally be making decisions today, this week, next week, that are going to work towards that 5-year goal. So I can't think of a super long-term one or I probably could, but the thing that comes to my mind again is the marathon training, just because it's an easy example. So most marathon plans are like 16 to 24 weeks, depending on your athletic ability. So most people aren't going to be able to say like, oh, I can go run a marathon tomorrow, right? That's not generally speaking something most people can do unless you're already trained for it. So but if you're relatively healthy and you have the physical ability, most people can train for a marathon, but you're going to be looking out at 24 weeks. So you can't go out and run the marathon right now. You're planning on it for 24 weeks. And so let's bring that down to like 12 weeks. Where do we need to be? 10 weeks, 5 weeks, 2 weeks, all the way down to today. Meaning today I can make the decision to go out and buy a new pair of sneakers or get fitted properly for sneakers and a running outfit. And then tomorrow I can go out and jog 1 mile, if that's where you are, or 2 miles. And then the next day, do the same thing. You can print out a plan. You can learn how to follow the plan all the way up until 24 weeks when you're able to run the marathon. So we want to make sure that these goals are timely, that they can be achieved in a expected timeline, whether it's short or long. Maybe a short-term goal is, I just want to start getting better quality sleep. And in order to do that, one of the things that I'm going to do is go to bed 30 minutes earlier. And so this week, I'm going to practice going to bed 30 minutes earlier in an overall goal of in 3 months or in 1 month, let's say 1 month, I'm going to have better quality sleep so that when I wake up, I feel rested and ready for my day. Okay. The next thing that's a barrier is relegated personal responsibility. And personal responsibility is something that I believe all of us as sober women know kind of a thing or two about, right? Because most of us who've have lived in active addiction and then gotten sober, we understand that it is our responsibility. It's our choice to stay drunk or using or to be sober. It's not our choice. It's not our choice whether we're an addict or not. It is our choice whether we choose to put that substance in our body or not. And so until we take personal responsibility for ourselves and our own life and our own personal development, will be very limited. And that also tends to keep people very much in a victim role. So your choices for your words, your actions, or even lack of actions is your responsibility. And taking personal responsibility for all of that is, in my view, one of the highest forms of self-awareness that we can attain. And like I said, when we think about our sobriety, how critical is it at some point for us to take personal responsibility for our recovery? And then not only when we're first getting sober, how critical is it for us to take personal responsibility for our recovery and our sobriety every single day, every week, moving forward? I don't care if you have 9 weeks, 9 years, or 90 years sober, we have to make that daily decision every single day, every single week and month to stay sober. And we likely wouldn't be sober right now if we weren't able at some point to take responsibility for our substance use. So one of the things that happens in relegated personal responsibility is blaming something outside of yourself for the situation you're in. So I don't know if any of you can relate to this. I know I can, not only in sobriety, but also in recovery, kind of pointing that finger out to somebody else to want to deflect from my own responsibility. But that blame doesn't get you anywhere. It's simply just a quick fix. It takes away the power from you because it gives others control and responsibility of your life and your growth. I don't know if anybody got sober in AA or has been around. There's some people that say, when one finger is pointing out, there's 3 fingers or 4 fingers pointing back at you. Meaning when we want to put the blame on others, most likely that we have a pretty big part in the story. Now, when it comes to things like childhood trauma or abuse or different things like that, I reserve the right to say that no, we don't. We can actually point the finger at somebody in those cases without us having to take a lot of personal responsibility for that happening to us. So we can't it's not our fault what happened to us, but it is where the personal responsibility takes place is in our healing power. So it's not our fault what happened to us, but it is our responsibility how we choose to heal from it. So to step out of that victim role and into an empowerment space where we're saying, I am responsible for my own healing. So other outside situations really have nothing to do with how you feel. It's really your internal thoughts that you have about those external situations that determine how our life is. So there's a lot of things that go on in life, a lot of really bad things, right? And so sometimes we really feel like they're happening to us or somebody's doing that to us. But outside situations don't have don't control our how we feel. We just allow that. We a lot of times allow our internal thoughts about those outside situations to take over, and thus sort of allowing other people or other situations to kind of keep us in that victim role and us not taking personal responsibility. I think this is such a critical concept, and it's something that's kind of becoming seemingly a lost art in our society right now. So we have to really work almost against the stream, right? To stay emotionally fit and well in this way, because we have to constantly be saying, like, what's my part in this story? Even if you got into a fight with your spouse and it was over something that you really didn't do anything wrong, or like you feel like he kind of just came in from work and was, going off or whatever, and 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 that wasn't your fault, and so he came in, but there's always a way for us to say, like, what was our part in that story? Well, maybe I didn't need to nag you about leaving your shoes on the floor right then, or maybe I could have been a little bit more empathetic when you were talking about your difficult day. So I'm not saying that it's really our fault, all these situations. I'm just saying that it's important for us to scan ourselves in any given time of stress or tumultuous feelings or situations, to see where is our responsibility in this. And even if it's minimal, it still can go a long way to dealing with any situation. And then we tend to cut ourselves off from self-awareness by using distractions. And I can't think of a better time than the time we're in right now, with the constant media and technology, where we have the ability to distract ourselves from any type of pain we're feeling. Really, we can avoid pain through distraction, all day long if we wanted to. We've got Netflix and Facebook and Instagram and, you know, so much video games, all the things. And how many of us can relate to that? Like, now our social media is just really driving our world. And even if you're not on it much, like I hear that, well, I don't really use it that much. And I'm not saying it's bad. I love my social media platforms just as much as anybody, but where it can cross over into that dysfunction is if we're using it as a way to keep ourselves from looking inward, where we're using it as a way to not deal with feelings when they come up, as a distraction. So easy for us to dive into our phones and our iPads, even TV, for just endless hours of mindless sitcoms or docu-series or whatever the heck the newest thing is, to take us out of our own world, our own pain, and our stress. And then, of course, sometimes this isn't a bad idea, right? I mean, who doesn't love vegging out on the couch on Friday night after a long work week with a movie or show? I know I do. But where this goes wrong is if it's always our go-to when stress or emotional situations arise. Because it can really, like I said, prevent us from being able to evaluate what's really going on with us. It can put up those walls, those barriers between us and the people who are closest to us. And even to our higher power, if you have a connection with a spiritual higher power or the universe, it can put up barriers to that as well and block us off from feeling those feelings. Sometimes you might get caught up in obsessing about your future, maybe even the what ifs, or maybe someday this will happen, or kind of talking like, oh, eventually we'll do this, or eventually I'll feel like this, instead of using the skills that we've been talking about all week long to determine what's really going on and what you really want right now. Or what are the small steps that you could take today that will help you to attain the future over the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? And of course, we can use food to numb our feelings and to dull the reality of our problems. I know I've told you many times about my own struggles with emotional eating, particularly in the last 4 years. And I can feel it happening now. Like, I don't know about you, but I know exactly, when I'm not in a good place or something comes into my life or my day, and I'm not in my self awareness space. And when I'm not grounded in my spiritual program and the positive self talk isn't there, I succumb to those temptations, right? Then I easily slip into it and I don't want to deal with my feelings. And not tapping into our strengths is another barrier to self awareness. This is just um, what we've been talking about a lot over the last couple weeks. I mean, not a couple weeks, couple days, about knowing what our strengths are. We all have a lot of them. You guys have a ton of strengths, and you probably know more about them now than when you started this week. But when we don't tap into them and really use them for good, then it's easy to not have them as our asset or to use them as barriers to self awareness. So, what does this mean for you guys even more? Like saying no to things that don't take advantage of your strengths. So, this is a lot about healthy boundaries, which we haven't really gotten into too much this week, but I do talk a lot about in my work because creating healthy boundaries is such a critical skill for emotional wellness. And it's something for some reason women really struggle with. I think we don't have always a good handle on what healthy boundaries look like in our personal lives and our professional lives. And it can cause us to, overspend, overeat, overextend ourselves with our time. So, learning how to say no to those things that aren't utilizing your strengths is a great way of staying in a self awareness space. You also want to pay close attention to situations that drain you. They take away their energy suckers. Maybe you feel uncomfortable or like a little sick to your stomach, or those things that make you want to cry. Just got to watch out for those. These guidelines that we set up for ourselves sometimes that we use to determine how we're treated in relationships. These are the boundaries that I'm talking about. Things like, what's acceptable to me and what's not, helping you to determine what you will and will not put up with. I mean, those are the boundaries that I'm talking about as well that aren't using your strengths. Number two is using your skills in multiple areas. So, making sure that when you do discover these strengths, which I know all of us are doing now, that we learn how to multitask them, right? So we use them in our personal and in our work lives, also in our health journeys, in our family, in our parenting, in our friendships. We want to cross them over into multiple areas of our lives. So maybe you find out that organizational skills are really a big part of your strengths, right? That you're really good at creating organized spaces um, to creating systems for, like those pantry videos I was telling you about. So you can bring your organizational skills that you use maybe in your home or your office to the other space. So if you're really good at organizing at home, but your office is a complete disaster, like it's just stuff everywhere, there's piles on the floor, things aren't put away properly, you can really take that organizational skill to your office as well and create systems there that are going to be helpful in making you more efficient and effective at your job. Um, there's probably some other things that you can think of that would really be good crossovers to multiple areas of your life. Like if one of your strengths is empathy or being a really good listener, we need to make sure that we're using that in all areas of our life. Like I'm a therapist by trade, right? So I need to make sure that I'm using my good clinical skills in my other areas of my life. It helps me in my parenting. When I can slow myself down and I'm very self-aware of the situation that I'm in and my own feelings, I can use my clinical skills in my parenting, or in my friendships, because it helps me be a better listener. It helps me be present and focused on the moment versus kind of into that future casting. So we want to use our skills in all of the areas of our life, or a lot of the areas. We never want to stop learning. Who wants to be a lifetime learner? I know I do, because you can notice where some of your weaknesses are that are blocking your strength identity steps. You can take steps that you can take for improving things. When we're open to learning, we can understand our weak spots and how we can build on them, how we can build them into becoming a strength even. We want to break them into small pieces. We never want to stop learning. We just always want to be looking for opportunities to break things down into smaller steps, to learn something new, and a way you could use your skills in a different way. Maybe procrastination or kind of lack of listening skills are preventing you from being a good friend. And so, what can you do to increase your motivation and learn more about active listening, to show the people that you care about that you are 100% invested when you're with them, that you are there with them? Or maybe something with your professional life is blocking you from being your best self there. You can learn that piece of software that we talked about before. Maybe that'll make you more efficient, or we can learn how to be a better conflict resolution person. So somebody who's better at resolving conflicts versus either just throwing your hands up and spinning around and being like, oh, I can't do this, or being like, this is why I hate this job, I'm leaving, or some other reactionary way of being versus saying, oh, you know what, I'm committed to learning. I want to do better at this. We're always going to put our strengths first. We talked about that just a minute ago. We want to make it a priority to spend more time on the things you enjoy and the things that you do well. We want that to be the bulk of our time. So if follow through is one of your strengths, like you're somebody that's really good at being committed and following through with things, make sure that you stick to plans that you make for yourself and with others as often as possible. You want to make sure that you're always doing what you say and saying what you do and following through with things. You want to resist any temptation or barriers that are going to pull you away from putting those strengths first. And then number 5 is stepping out of your comfort zone. I know this is kind of cliche. We probably hear this a lot, but being able to experience growth, you have to push yourself out of that zone of comfort, right? You got to almost be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes in order to grow into new spaces. So I always say we want to make it a point to try something new regularly. It doesn't have to be extravagant or expensive, but something new. So we want to go to a new place. If you always hike in the same trail every single week, you always go, then let's see if we can pick a different one, like drive to a different trail. Or if you always are going for a run, maybe you could ride your bike instead, for exercise or even social time. You can take classes, you can do like a paint night or take a photography class, or even reading a book in a different genre, than you're used to. Just try it. Trying new restaurants, maybe going to a different area of the city you live in, maybe going to a new museum, or just challenging yourself to find ways to expand your life by stepping out of that comfort zone pretty regularly. I was on a roll there for a little while where I said I was going to try some kind of new complementary medicine, like holistic treatment of sorts once a month. And so a couple months ago, I booked a day to go to this salt bath, I think it's called, where it's like a giant, kind of a clamshell bathtub thing that's filled with like 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, right? And you go in it, it's called a float tank. That's what it was. And you kind of float along and it de-stresses you, it detoxifies your body. There's a lot of really good health benefits for it, but I had never done this. I mean, I take Epsom salt baths at home, but I was like, this is really cool. I'm going to try this. And next I want to try Reiki and a couple other things I have on my list. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to commit to once a month or so, it might be more than, it might be 6 weeks or every 2 months, trying a new form of complementary therapy, just because there's so many different things out there that people try and I'm not familiar with all of them. And to me, it was really exciting. So that's how I was choosing to really up my kind of stepping out of my comfort zone and learning something new um, this particular year. All right, so I threw a lot of stuff at you, but understanding the barriers to self-awareness is really important because it's going to be help you identify those red flags when they come up, right? Using the strengths that you discovered, using the homework to really identify what these barriers are for you and the most problematic areas. So I want you to really dig into, if you haven't done the strengths assessment or strengths worksheet, I want you to make sure that you are doing that. I know that you guys are working hard this week. It is a lot. So again, like I said, don't worry. I won't leave you hanging. We will continue to work on things together in the next opportunity because I don't want you to just do this and then not complete it. Make sure you also check out the SMART Goals worksheet. The link is in the email I sent you this morning. I can drop it in the Facebook group as well. If you don't have it, just let me know. And I can't wait to see what you guys come up with, because once we start committing to this stuff, it's amazing the kinds of things that are going to change in our lives. It's amazing the things that we will do when we start committing to goal planning and then baby stepping our way towards those things in a very realistic and intentional way. So if anybody has any questions or has any comments about anything I just said, I can stop sharing my screen now. Make sure that it takes me a minute to load these because they're not being live streamed. So I have to wait for it to convert and then upload it to Facebook and all the things. So hi, Laurie, how are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to see you.
Good to see you too. So thanks for having this today. Glad I could come.
Yeah, me too. I know Susan said she had a work meeting that she couldn't miss, which is totally understandable. I know that was a lot. This was like probably one of the biggest days, but there was a lot to cover and I wanted to make sure I did it in a really kind of succinct and specific way. If anybody needs to rewatch it, of course, you can do that because there's a lot of material. Just go through the homework and make sure if you have any questions, you just leave them for me and I will answer them as quickly as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was funny to me. I because I did do the work on this page this morning, and on a lot of stuff came up with my work in the page only because it we have really high goals. Like, and a couple years ago they changed the A in SMART to aspirational.
Okay.
So that's led to a lot of not hitting those. I mean, some years we have a great, last year wasn't a good example, but like other years we're able to hit the number or exceed it even, and that's well and good, but sometimes especially when that goal is set, without our feedback or without listening to what's behind it or what we could possibly do, then we get into like accountability problems and those kind. So it was funny because a lot of things came up for me on all the different questions.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important that you're noticing that. And one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking was it's important, even in our work lives, when that's happening, we still have to have we have accountability to our jobs. Obviously, your company or boss or whatever is saying you need to do this, this, and this. Okay, right, fine. But if some of that aspirational stuff is just unrealistic, it's unrealistic, but that's what they want to put in there and you can't control that. That's what it is. But where you have to be very cautious, all of us have to be cautious, is to not step into that and pick that up as our own. So to get confused on like, well, I'm not doing a good enough job because I didn't meet this goal, or when it's truly not a real possible goal. So not turning that inward to doing the negative self-talk about like, well, I'm not good enough, or maybe I shouldn't be in this job, or I don't deserve it, or whatever could happen in those situations, to really learn how to say, yeah, I mean, they wanted us to do this and I gave it my all, but the time I had, and short of being able to work 100 hours in a week, it's not attainable, and being able to be comfortable with that, which is
Yeah,
very challenging.
it is.
People
It
who
is.
are, type A, who like to achieve and want to do well at work. But that's an important part of professional life, I think, because if you don't, then you're constantly going to be in this like really bad cycle of like, I'm not measuring up at work, or I'm
Mhm.
not, when you have to be able to say, like, this isn't about me. This is the unattainable goals they have, and being able to be like, yep, I did the best I could in the time I had. I
Right.
hit my 10 hours today or 8 hours, and this is what I could do. And that's what it
Mhm.
is. But that
Mhm.
takes a lot of attention and work.
Yeah, it does. And I also lead a group of people. So I feel some of their, like, they're getting the same goals.
Yeah.
So coming down from above. So yeah, we're all on the hook for that, trying to
Yeah.
manage the feelings around it and still work hard and try to do our best to hit what we can in the
Yeah,
time
and
we
I think
have.
that that's a really interesting point about being a good leader. I mean, so good leadership skills come into play with this. So then they're turning to you as their guru, right? Their person.
Mhm.
And if you're not um content and peaceful on the inside related to what you're doing, they're going to pick that up, and then it's going to be in your leadership style to like push, 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 and like kind of come down on them with a hammer versus being realistic. Like, so maybe your role as a leader is to say, hey, listen, this is what they're saying. This is what, in my experience, I know is attainable. And so we need to be somewhere around that. Like, however you choose to communicate that with your team, that's up to you. But being
Mhm.
being a person who's a leader coming from that place of style, leadership style, versus that, like, if you don't do this, you're gonna, you
Yeah.
don't measure up. Like,
It's not my style.
I know, I'm
But
just
yeah,
saying,
I
but
know
it's
what you
easy
mean.
for us to have that in our minds,
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's challenging for leaders to discern, how much of this is realistic, what are people's true capacity, and how can I lead them to help them understand you've done the best you can versus you're not measuring up.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Awesome job.
Okay, thanks.
All right, girl. Well, I will see you tomorrow.
All right. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Take
Bye.
care.